anything to this? What's your take? What's your interpretation? Now what George's observation is. But beside being off, I mean, we know that it's George.
I mean, it kind of speaks to the fact that he doesn't get as much attention as he wants. And he thinks him being in an institution like that will bring that to him.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we see yet another episode, another depiction of this particular character being very egocentric. He only sees what's going on through his lens and can only view things, as well as including his girlfriend's being infirmed through his perspective. It must be nice to be able to go slippers all day. How nice is it that she went through what she went through to get admitted, which is limited danger to self or others, right? How's that missed? That's George. That's certainly George. Is there any truth to what George says? I mean, yes, they do wear slippers. Yes, they do that, but there's a little bit more to it that is correct. And then I think as clinicians, we need to be mindful of, and that is in the hospital, you will receive care that is comparable to the care you received when you were 2 and your mom took care of you. Right? You push, and this is right next door, or a psychiatric facility. You push a button and people come running, right? You don't get that at home. And if you think you're going to get that home, you're not going to get that at home, right? If your husband thinks they're going to get that at home, they're probably not going to get that at home, right? You go to the bathroom, you get changed. You need to get washed, you get bathed. You have someone who is literally there to care for you 24 hours a day. So many people will actually feel this when they're in a hospital, and there is some incentive to stay there. This is a total unconscious thing. And what I'm getting at is when that unconscious motivation becomes the focus of clinical attention, we actually can now begin to talk about a mental disorder that captures all of that, which is what? Now, the dependent personality is the personality characterized by needing or requiring affirmation and reassurance for your every next step. So very difficult for an individual to do anything without some type of nurturing, reinforcement, encouragement. That's not this. This is factitious disorder.
I was going to say it. I should have just said it.
It's no penalty. Factitious disorder. And I think the point that I want to make here is that there is a factitious component to several non-factitious disorders, right? So we see this in hospital a lot, that a person's admitted for X, and they have a GI bleed, and they have a NG tube in, and they have a scheduled upper and lower. I mean, and we get a consult that of feigning symptoms because they're saying things that are being interpreted as they're wanting to be in the hospital. That's difficult. Or when discharge planning meetings occur, they're very resistant. And it just reminds us that people can actually feel that, especially unconsciously, but still be in the hospital for a real reason. When we talk about these artificial conditions, these mental disorders like factitious, that are again made up by the APA, we often think of them as just rigid diagnoses, but we really should reconsider, especially like factitious, that the lines are blurred, that there could be a factitious component to a lot of behavior when it comes to human motivation. Human motivation is very, very rarely all conscious and all subconscious or unconscious. So just a reminder, I think George reminds us of that here. Other observations, Seinfeld, the truth. By the way, if a person were in a hospital and they were getting nurtured and that nurturing did come off as, it seems like they're really unmotivated to leave. And a psychiatrist walked in and thought, well, this appears to warrant independent clinical attention. And now we're entertaining factitious disorder. what may happen when you walk back in that room to suggest that it might be another condition that is the product of unconscious as well as conscious motivation. What's the other condition we always look at that's related to the somatic symptom disorders that we always have in the differential affectiveness?
Malingering.
Yeah, and what's the difference? What is the one differentiating factor that would allow us to say, no, this is malingering and not factitious?
There's some sort of like drive for it, like money or
Yeah.
something.
External incentive.
Yeah.
Yeah, money's very, very common external incentive. I just wanted to make sure I commented on that before we left this particular topic. Other observations, Seinfeld.
I don't know if it really counts, but I did notice how, I guess it's not narcissism, but everybody's so selfish. Everybody's so like Jerry only cares about his getting audited and stuff. So they go to us like to visit someone when they're in a psychiatric unit just to get his paperwork back. Like that's very
I was
selfish.
gonna say that, yeah, they should have like cared more about, like, especially if George like really did like her, they should have cared about like her mental health
Right.
rather than like him just getting his money.
Yeah. It definitely starts out with egocentrism.
Mm.
And there's probably a lot of other terms that we can use that might be more severe forms of egocentrism. Egocentrism is nothing more than an incapacity. But no matter what terms we may adopt to describe one's egocentrism, I think the most egregious and severe form of it would be the narcissistic personality disorder. And while I think not only Jerry in this episode, we already talked about George, and maybe not this episode, but absolutely positively other episodes, Elaine and Kramer too. None of the four really actually reach clinical diagnosis for that personality disorder. So they definitely operate on that continuum, and some are worse than others depending on the episode.
I was also a little bit confused if like, because I knew Jerry went on a date with Elaine, and then that's when he started like donating to the volcano thing. Did he like continue donating, and was it okay? So he was trying to get out of that one donation that he made?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he did it to impress her. He did it to impress her.
The roommate dynamic was interesting too, but I don't know, like
Also,
if there's
sick.
I feel like as someone who has a roommate, I can understand like learning to use that like shared space in a certain way, and it was really upsetting her, but she didn't want to say it honestly. But I don't know from a clinical standpoint where we would go with that.
Yeah, so yeah, I think your clinical career probably starts when you become the RA. We have to actually take some responsibility over the dynamic of different rooms and then the hall. And then someday maybe you become a chair. But it starts early when you begin to observe this stuff. I think one of the major teaching points of this gets back to the 1960s, where researchers, where theorists began to identify that irrespective of what artificial category the APA says you have, whatever the psychiatrist is communicating to you, the psychologist is communicating to you, your outcomes are going to be worse if you're put into situations in which those types of traits are fostered versus situations in which we would think that it would be more supportive. And that begins with Minuchin, I think, for most of us in terms of identifying that maladaptive family dynamic. Certainly still plays out today, no doubt about it. Final thoughts? The truth?
I could see how it would be uncomfortable for Elaine to see that like her roommate was dating one of her close friends, and how like she could not really want that happen, especially when she sees like the other side of him when the other guys aren't around.
Yeah, that's something that comes up every now and then in some episodes of this situational comedy that these people really feed off each other in a group dynamic. And and maybe with the exception of Jerry, they have really a significant loss of identity. And they feel far different when isolated. And there's definitely episodes in which that isolation ironically plays out. The mirror is really held up when they're one-on-one. There's another episode I'm often reminded of where I think Jerry gets sick, or Jerry ends up having to change his plans, and Elaine and George are left to hang out together one night, and they have nothing to talk about. What they do, just to kind of piggyback on what we just said, they triangulate Jerry. So they actually foster the Minutian dynamic. They have a common enemy, and proverbially speaking, and they triangulate Jerry. Jerry's not there, and they both laugh at the different things he does.
We watched that one.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Right? That's Minutia. That's triangulation. The dyad is healthy. They thrive. They talk. They laugh, only because they triangulate another person in that group. In this case, it was Jerry. Once I think George brings something up, and Elaine says, "You said that already," and they realize they've run out of things to talk about pertaining to Jerry. The mood just absolutely flatlines from there. So that's Minutia, that's triangulation. So bringing it back full circle. We'll leave it there. We'll have folks log off. We'll give you guys a minute to log right back on the other link so we can begin table reps.